Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, whatever platform you're listening to us on, wherever in the world you are listening. As always, I appreciate the support very, very much. Today's topic is going to be about maintaining a consistently successful program. In previous episodes, we've talked to guests about turning a program around. We've talked about rebuilding. We've kind of talked about just building from the ground up at a new school. So I think it's a good time to dedicate an episode to kind of the opposite end of that spectrum and talk about coaching at a program where success is expected and you're sort of maintaining greatness, so to speak. So we're going to talk with our guest about his program and how his program is consistently successful, as well as avoiding complacency, and also some tips for coaches who may be struggling a little bit with consistency and kind of have an up and down program, giving some tips and advice to coaches who might be in that situation as well. So my guest today to discuss this topic is the head men's basketball coach at Thayer High School. I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Matt Pitts. Coach, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight knowledge on this topic. I know that so many coaches are eager to be in a position kind of like you're in. So we're looking forward to kind of hearing about your program, your area, and everything. So it should be a good one. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your journey. Where is the game of basketball taking you, and where is your coaching journey taking you to get you to Thayer?
Well, I'm from Thayer. I played high school basketball here, graduated from here. Then I went off to college, and I spent 3 years coaching away from here. And then the guy that I played for actually needed an assistant. So I came back here and I assisted him for 3 seasons. And then I'll be fixing to start my 16th season here as a head coach. So I've been here 19 total.
That's awesome. And staying local and being a product of Thayer and then having the opportunity to coach there, that's great. So I'm going to ask you before we even get into the first question there, how has your experience at Thayer as a player and then being there as a coach, how has it kind of helped you in terms of understanding the community and understanding the area and kind of understanding the needs of Thayer in general?
You know, the guy that I played for, he came in here as I think I was in the 7th or 8th grade, and the basketball program here had kind of been up and down, and he kind of got things going, and he's an excellent coach and really was the guy that probably, led me in the direction of coaching just because I thought a lot of him and respected him and the job that he did. So being around a winner like he was, and then I think it just led me in this direction. And then being from the area, I think I understood the culture of, and that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but this is just a winning community. They're kind of blue collar. They really want you to work. They let you coach their kids. I mean, it's really a perfect fit for what we're trying to do here, I think.
Yeah, for sure. No, it sounds like it. And I think that having that sort of culture in the area definitely helps with maintaining sports in an athletic sense, for sure. And we kind of just talked about it, so I'll kind of ask it more specifically, though you did just sort of address it in your answer now, which is awesome. But kind of give our listeners out there, since I know we have some international all the way from coast to coast in the U.S. here, kind of set the scene for us about what Thayer, Missouri kind of looks like. Like what's kind of the culture? I know he just talked about, we've heard that word around a lot, but can you kind of set the scene of what somebody would see in the area if they were to step foot into Thayer, Missouri, and what that's like?
Yeah, we're a town of about 2,200 people. In our high school, grades 9 through 12, we've got probably around 200 students. We've got a Walmart, a McDonald's, the Dairy Queen. There's not a whole lot shaking here. And that's the one thing, sports takes a big spot in our community, and it plays a big role in just in what we do on Friday nights as far as football games go. I mean, this place is always packed. Basketball games, likewise. People really, they schedule their lives and their weeks a lot of times about what's going on athletically here at our school.
No, that's awesome. That's kind of the that Friday Night Lights sort of thing, and the the town kind of rallies around the sports that you have in the area, which makes me think then that for the younger like kids, like elementary age kids who are kind of getting into sports and starting to play them at a young age, they must like look up to the high school players. They must be like rock stars to them or something.
Yeah, I think so. And that's something, we talk about to our kids a lot, because I think sometimes as high school students and even as professional athletes, I think a lot of those guys, you don't realize the lives that you're touching. So we do talk a little bit about, you never know who's watching and you never know whose role model you are. So try to do things the right way. And I remember being a kid just probably like you did, and you'd be in the basement and you'd be playing like you were one of the players on the team. And I know those kids do that. And like I said, we talk about that with our guys probably a couple times a year.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. I can picture myself emulating players. I can go right back into that headspace as a kid and imagine myself as a basketball player doing all these little moves that I thought other people were doing. That's funny. Awesome. So as we talked about, our topic is going to just be about maintaining consistent success, and there's so much to this, ranging from how to maintain it versus dealing with inconsistency, complacency. So a lot of different areas that we're gonna cover on this one. So let's kind of start with the habits that you think have led to the program to be consistently successful. So if you had to think about, all right, what makes us consistently contenders or winners, year in, year out, what do you think the habits are that's built that?
One of the blessings that I have here, and probably one of the biggest reasons I think for our success, is the football coach and I are really close friends. As a matter of fact, he assisted me for a little while back in the day, and then I assisted him on the sidelines for 8 or 9 seasons, and I still help with them on game nights in the booths on Fridays. And, one thing that he and I talk about a lot is the fact that we kind of look at it more as a program, not so much as football and basketball. We look at it as we're trying to do what's best for all those kids, because we share a lot of kids. And I think that's a huge deal year in and year out. And I think that may be one of the biggest reasons we've been able to do what we've done.
To kind of extrapolate that point a little bit further, besides your boys' basketball program, is there kind of a tradition of success in other sports in your school as well? Does it kind of permeate throughout the school?
Yeah, it really does. The football has been very successful, and the girls' basketball program is very successful. We've been successful on the boys' side. So yeah, we've kind of got a culture established here of winning, and that's that's huge when other programs can experience success also. And I think winning breeds winning, and success breeds success. And those kids, when you win on one, if you win on a football field, you just kind of have a knack for knowing how to win. And like a buddy always told me, winners win. And I think that's one of the things that really helps us.
And I will assume that with having a small school, I think you mentioned the population is about 200, then that probably leads to a lot of multi-sport athletes then who are, successful in one area and probably want that to translate to the other sports that they do throughout the year.
Oh yeah. And, every team's a little different. Every season's different. I've had as many as, you might have 80% of your guys playing football, and then, you might have as little as 20% of your guys playing. But, one thing we tried to, when they lift during the summer in the weight room, all the football and basketball guys are in there together. There's no differentiation in what's going on there. I mean, they're all doing the same things. They're all lifting the same weights, same workouts. And I think that really helps, because I just think there's a toughness factor there that when all those guys are together, I just think it's a huge deal for us.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool to see programs and see schools where the sports are kind of like really integrated. I know it's really easy for programs to kind of get on their own island, and coaches in a way to kind of have their team, and then this other coach at the school has their team, and they're kind of very much separated from each other. So I think it sounds really healthy to have like everybody sort of integrated with one another as best you can, and everybody kind of sees themselves as working towards the same cause, right? That even if I'm coaching basketball, like I'm working for my school to be successful and our program to represent the school well, just like another coach at our school is trying to do the same for theirs. It's kind of like working for the same sort of goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's huge, not only on the sporting side of things and in all your programs, but even in the classroom, academically, we're very strong here too. And I think a lot of that is our teachers. They really push those kids, and just like we push them on the bench and on the sideline. I mean, we stay after those guys and gals to do the best that they can do, and our teachers are also the same way. And I think it involves everybody. I don't think you can let your guard down in any aspect of it, because I think if you're going to be successful, I just think it takes everybody.
Yeah, like it's why we use that term program, right? Like program, it's so much more than a team. It kind of involves so many different people and so many different areas that I think it's a little tangenty, but I think it is very difficult for like one particular like sports team at a school to be really successful and have like not really have success in academics or other programs as well. I think it's just a lot easier to have it where everybody's kind of pushing each other to be the most successful that they can. No, that's awesome. I would be remiss, Coach, if I didn't actually ask about, I have to list the whole resume there of the basketball program, but I'm sure our guests want to know what tangibly that success has looked like on the court. What sort of accomplishments or things have your team been fortunate enough to achieve throughout your years, maybe playing and coaching as well?
In my 10-year coaching here, this is my going into my 16th season as a head coach here, we've never missed a district championship game. We've played in going back to 1994. I want to say maybe we've only missed one district championship game in that time, and that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
In that time here, in my 15 years, we've won 11 district championships, 5 conference championships, been to a Final Four. So we've been very blessed to have the success we've had.
No, that's fantastic. And it takes a lot, because those are long seasons. I mean, it. Those are long seasons to be getting through. And as since you've been there and coaching and been on that ride, and that is such a long journey. I know I'm kind of jumping out of order here, but this kind of makes me think about it now. For you personally as a coach, knowing that, hey, I have a successful program, we're going to be having long seasons that I got to buckle up for and be ready for. How do you as a coach kind of mentally stay sharp and stay focused and stay on your game through these consistently long seasons that you've been having?
I think, one of the most important things for me is, I have a very supportive wife, and I've got 2 boys that play, so our life kind of revolves around the game, which makes it easy because that's what those guys want to do. And my wife, it's not like she goes out of her way to find a basketball game, because she sees plenty of them, but she does a great job of keeping us all reined in. And kind of a funny story about her. Yesterday we were talking, and just out of the blue, she said, just as typical coach's wife, she says, "What's your plan when the shot clock comes in?" Just out of the blue. We're just sitting there talking. And I got to explain it. And she said, "I didn't want an answer." She said, "I just wanted to know what your plan was." So that explains her, kind of sums her up.
No, that's quite the question to be asked too. I like how she didn't want the answer too. Just let you think about it. Just what's your plan to put in? No, it's funny. I probably should be thinking about that too. I think here in Arizona, we're pushing to get that shot clock in. So probably need somebody to ask me those questions too to keep me honest. No, that's funny. That's awesome. So with that kind of leads into this other question. Now, you talked about all the district championship games you've been to, and I'm assuming then that year in and year out, you're kind of playing the same teams, at least within your conference or division. You're kind of seeing success probably against those teams kind of year in and year out. And it's very easy, I think, to fall into a trap of kind of complacency where, you think that you can just go show up, players or coaches like show up and just win, and that's just going to be how it is. So how have you kind of avoided, that level of complacency and making sure that your players are staying sharp and staying focused and kind of taking things one game at a time?
I think, we talk a lot about, just making the right basketball play, not, and I tell our guys, if you make the right play 100 times, it's going to work out more times than not. And I think they focus on that kind of thing daily. Even like I said, from a culture standpoint, that's something that you've got to work on daily. You can't just sit back and expect it to stay where it's at. And focus wise, you hear a lot of guys talk about, the biggest game on your schedule or who's your main rival. I've tried to, tell our guys that the biggest game's the next game. And no matter who you're playing, our practices are going to look the same. We would prepare for, somebody that's sub 500, just like we would prepare for somebody that's undefeated. The way we do that and look at that doesn't change. So our daily routine is no matter who the opponent, no matter what's going on, our preparation is going to be the same.
And let's kind of dive a little bit into that with the level of preparation. To be a consistently successful program, you are going to have a certain level of preparation and standards that you adhere to in regards to that. So in regards to, let's just kind of go with, practice plans and having, consistently successful practices, which lead to results on the court. What have your practices, what do your practices look like? And has that evolved at all throughout the years, or what has kind of stayed consistent with your practice plans?
As far as, they always change. I mean, basically just, you want to try to add some life to them every year, something different where you're not getting complacent in practice. Just toughness. We preach defense a lot, obviously, like everybody else does. Rebounding, something we really emphasize. And just the hard work and, trying to keep practice upbeat and positive, keep the kids moving, not a lot of downtime. I'm a guy that, if we can practice hard for an hour and a half, run up and down the floor for maybe 30 minutes and have a 2-hour practice, I really try to do that daily. Because I really believe after the 2-hour mark, you kind of lose those guys. So that's kind of what we do. Offensively, we like to shoot as much as we can in practice, but during the season that changes. And then, not having, every year's different as far as I may have 10 football players playing and only have 7 guys in practice until we get those football guys. And with the success that Coach Weber and the football program have had, we've had years where we would practice. We played in the state finals 2 years in a row, and we practiced twice one year and had to play the third day. So we've had to it really just depends on the year as far as what practices look like and what you're trying to get done.
I do like the idea of kind of having, in a way, kind of like a mental time limit on practices, because it's probably is diminishing returns after a certain point. And it's, if you can get it all in and you can work hard in a practice and get everything you need done within that time frame, then at least I'm kind of the mindset of, well, I don't want to just have you here just to have you here. Like, if we got what we needed done and we did a good job, well, we did it. and
yeah,
we can focus. Go ahead.
I think as coaches, sometimes we may say, let's run this one more time. And no, we didn't do it. So now we're 15 minutes in, and we really only did that to make ourselves feel better. It didn't really affect anything that went on other than we can sleep a little better that night. And I think I know I'm guilty of that a lot. And that's something, as I've gotten older, I've tried to do less of. Let's do what we've got to do. Let's do it hard. Let's do it right. And let's get out of here.
Yeah, I've definitely been there where I was like, all right, we're going to do this, and then we're done, and then we didn't do it right, and then we kept doing it again. Then I saw something else I didn't like. Next thing you know, I'm doing 20 minutes on something I thought was 30 seconds because I couldn't let it go.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us are guilty of that, though.
Very much so.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times about how the landscape of your team, as any high school coaches will, kind of changes year in and year out depending on who you got coming in. When it comes to what you run on the court, are there things that you believe in that you stay consistent in and have stayed consistent in throughout the years? And how much do you kind of adapt or change what you like to run based on who you have that year?
Offensively, it really changes. And you guys know at the high school level, you get, 2 years ago or 3, I had 2 post guys that were 6'5". We ran a lot of, 2-man motion stuff, high-low type stuff. Then last year, the biggest kid that we put on the floor that started for us was about 6'1", so we had to go to more guard-oriented offense. Now, defensively, one thing I think that kind of makes us a little uncommon is we play matchup zone and have exclusively for as long as I can remember in my whole tenure here. And when I say exclusively, I'm talking I don't remember playing more than 5 possessions of anything else last year total. That team was 24-2 and got beat in the state quarterfinals. And we did not play anything other than that. And, and that's one thing when we talk about programs and success, I think you need continuity in some form. I think defensively, I think people need to know what you're about. I think that when they talk about your program and they're going to play you, they need to know this is what's fixing to happen. They're going to guard our tails off. They're going to rebound everything. They're going to get to every loose ball. I just think when people talk about a program, they need to know what it's about and what your calling card is. And I think people that jump around sometimes never get really good at something. And that's just something, and I know everybody's different, but that matchup's been good for us and it's evolved. But I think hanging your hat on something and being really, really passionate about what you do on the defensive end is a big deal.
And just to go a little bit further to that, what led to you kind of sticking with the matchup zone? What is it that you like about it that you kind of hang your hat on it?
When I was a senior in high school, the guy that I played for, he implemented that, and we really that was our best year of my 4 playing. Led to the district championship and a playoff win. And he continued to have success running that, even in my time away. And then when I came back, I assisted him for 3 years, and that's what we played. And then when I took over in that 4th season, that was the easiest fit for us at the time. We didn't have a lot of guys coming back at that point, but we had guys that were familiar with our system. So we just stuck with it. And now 16 years later as a head coach, I'm still doing it. Now it's evolved some because zone offenses have evolved, but we stuck with it. And the thing I like about it, our size, we don't always have big stature players out there. So playing man-to-man full-time or, that doesn't dictate success for us a lot, just because, like I said, last year, our biggest guy was 6'1", but this matchup has really allowed us to take advantage of some things. And there's pros to it and there's cons to it like everything else, but it's been really, really good to us.
And just to ask one more question about it, because I'm always fascinated about coaches who they have something that they're really strong on, they're really passionate on, and they'll tweak it based on their personnel. But like I said, it's the thing that they kind of hang their hat on, to the point where I'm sure that the other teams that you play every year, they know what it is you're going to do, but they're just not able to come up with, in some cases, the right formula, or just be able to kind of break it, for a lack of a better term. So for you to kind of stay consistently great, you kind of know then that, hey, like these teams know what we're going to run, but this is our identity and we'll make tweaks to it and we're going to stick with it because that's something that we believe in. And I think that's really great, because I'm sure as you can speak to, you have teams who know what you're going to do because you play them every year, but that you just run it so well and your guys run it well that you're still able to have success with it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things, if you ask anybody around or, throughout the state of Missouri, if you ask them if you said Thayer basketball, what's the first thing that pops in your head? And they're probably going to say matchup zone defense. And that's kind of what we're known for. But it's, yes. And like you say, hanging your hat on something and your kids knowing and they believe in it. That's the biggest thing, being committed, being bought in, and understanding that this is what we're going to do and it's going to lead to success. We just got to learn it and stay with it. And, we started implementing it in the 7th grade. Not quite obviously as in depth as we do at the high school level, but we start doing that with our 7th and 8th graders. And then in JV, we continue to do that. And then by the time they're, juniors and seniors, they're pretty well versed at what's going on. I think that's huge. We don't like to use the word zone a lot, just because when people think of zone defense, you think of people standing around and not doing this or not rebounding or whatever. It's really not like that with us. But again, it's program wide, as far as our girls even run it a lot of the time and have had success running it. So it's it's pretty uncommon to have something like that for such a long time.
No, that's great. Yeah, like that's really cool. I think you've really reached a certain level as a program when somebody can just say your school's name and they can immediately be like, "Oh yeah, that they do this." Like I feel like you've made it once you can have somebody say that about your program. That's really cool. You just brought up about a little bit more about the youth level there, about 7th and 8th graders and kind of sort of working them in or kind of building them up to getting them ready step by step for what they're going to need when they get into high school. For your program's success, how important has the youth level been and establishing your youth program or working with your youth program in order to kind of get them ready for what high school is going to be like?
It's huge. Our elementary programs in basketball and football are really strong. Those kids play a lot. They like to play. And, the fundamental part of it, dribble, pass, and shoot, that's obviously something they've got to learn before they get into the 7th grade. But, our community does a good job with that. And then at the junior high level, 7th and 8th grade, my assistant actually coaches our 7th and 8th grade team. So he does a good job and he knows what he's doing and what we expect. And so he gets those guys prepared very, very well for when they turn freshmen and they're in there in the high school practice with our older guys.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think for anyone out there who's able to have, strong youth coaches who are doing it the right way, like hold on to them. Hold on to them as best as you can, because they are, at least in my experience, they're kind of rare. And I understand it too, because in many ways it is kind of a thankless job too. So
oh yes, it is.
lots of respect to all those doing that for sure. Which just popped in another question in my head. For as long as you've been there and being consistently successful, obviously you can't do it alone in terms of your coaching staff. So how have you kind of worked in your coaching staff, your JV coach, assistant coaches that you have? How have you kind of dealt with, I don't even know if there's been a revolving door in my experience. I've seen it a lot, but maybe you haven't had that. Working with your assistant coaches, your JV coaches, and have you been able to have consistency in terms of them being there? Have you gone through a lot that kind of come in and out? What's that experience been like as you kind of get those assistant and JV coaches kind of coaching to the standard that you want it there?
For the first, probably, I can't remember how many years, my brother, who's the principal here at school, he was actually my assistant, and he helped me for a long time. And then the last couple of assistants that I've had both played for me. So the continuity of having players, 2 guys that played for me, and then my brother played here also. So he's familiar with the area and the culture. So I've been very fortunate and blessed to have assistants that know the area. They know what we expect. They played for me or they played with me, as far as my brother played on the same team. So as far as, let's say, teaching the matchup zone, those guys are all well versed in that when we get them in here. So, there's a lot of pressure on an assistant to learn something like that as fast as as you would know. I mean, if you're trying to learn something that quick and to be able to teach it, there's a lot of pressure there. So we've been able to, by hiring guys that played for us and keeping it, I don't want to say in-house, but kind of in-house, that's been good for us.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. They say that the highest level of mastery on learning something is if you're able to teach it to somebody else. So yeah. To be able to learn that and be able to explain it to others, because I mean, as you know, like you need your assistant coaches, you need them to be valuable resources for your players, right? So that when your players have a question, you're not always around, that your assistant coaches can, see something in the matchup zone, for example, that you run and be able to tell them like, hey, this is what you need to be doing, and this is what you should be doing. And it's really important that they're seen as like experts and people who are go-to people in case you're not always there. I mean, I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, no question. I think that, when you're looking, or as an assistant, what you would want is a guy over there that if something happened and you went down, he could just step up and step right in and just go. And I think I've been very, very blessed to have guys like that. I've got Coach Steed like that. He's like that right now. If I wasn't there to do it, he would be just fine doing it. And it's just been a really, like I said, just the whole story, having guys playing for me, coaching with me, having my brother as an assistant. It's just been it's just kind of a cool story, the whole thing.
Hey, I give you a lot of credit, coach. If you can coach with your brother and make that work, I'm trying to picture doing anything of that level of some people in my family, and I don't know. I don't know how that would go. So I give you props for being able to do that.
Well,
That's
I
awesome.
didn't say there weren't moments where he wanted to choke me and vice versa, but
Uh,
we made it through it, and he did a heck of a job for me.
that's awesome. That's funny. We've touched a little bit here and there about the idea of like culture and like what, and it's kind of like this boogeyman word, culture. I don't know exactly what it means. It means something to so many different people, but when your players have to, obviously adhere to a certain level of intensity and focus and commitment. Is culture building anything that you sort of like think about? Do you talk about like your team's culture or standards or rules, or is there a direct conversation that talks about like this is the culture here at Thayer, or do you not really use that word a lot? I guess kind of what's your thought about that word almost in general?
We use it some, um, but like we said earlier, I think it's something that you have to continually work on it, and I don't, and
Hmm.
it's one of those things that uh, whether it be in a weight room or whether it be on the football field or baseball field or wherever it might be, that needs to be synonymous throughout all those programs. And I think what we talked a little bit earlier, so many times you've got your football guys and then you've got your basketball guys, and they're so far separated, and even their
Hmm.
thought and their mindset on how this should look, even philosophically, uh, the closer you can get all those things together, um, because we, like, back to your question, we don't just sit down and say, here's what this looks like. Uh, Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're not going to do. I mean, we've been really blessed, and we, when those guys graduate and they move on, they've taught those other guys, those younger guys, how this is supposed to go, how you're supposed to practice, how you're supposed to act when you're out eating after a ball game as a group, how you're supposed to act, anywhere you are, what we expect and the standards, and people may be looking at you not only as a basketball player, obviously as a human being, and that's the biggest thing. Leave things better than you found them, and there's just lots that goes into it, and it's more than how hard you guard the basketball or how hard you box out or will you get on a loose ball. There's just a lot
Hmm.
more to culture than people think.
And was that something that was established for you when you were playing? Has that just been something that's kind of been permeated throughout Fair as long as you can remember, or are there things that you feel like you either had to like explicitly address or bring up, or sort of just intentionally teach to get them where you wanted them to be?
No, when I played here for, Coach Hawkins was the basketball coach that I talked about that had a big impact on my
Hmm.
life. Coach Meek, uh, Coach Meek was my football coach. He just turned 90 years old, and he is still on the sideline, if that tells you anything about that guy. He's a gem, and the things that he taught me, Coach Atkinson, there's tons of them, but the culture here really with those three guys, and then moving right into Coach Weber, who's our football coach now, and then I've just tried to build on what they did, and just try to make it, continue it, and hope it's a little better than it was when I found it, and hope the next guy can do the same. I just think there's a lot that goes into it. It's
Yeah,
not just me or what I do.
yeah, and as you kind of mentioned before, how important it is for your program to be successful to kind of work with the other coaches, because it kind of takes everybody to do it. And I know that you brought it up, and so I'm going to explicitly ask you what has been the importance, or how important has it been for you to also, as a coach, when you talk about your program being consistently successful, to work with the teachers and to work with the administration and work with people who are doing the non-athletic things? How important has those conversations and relationships been to your program being where it needs to be?
Well, I think that goes back to a little earlier. We talked about everybody kind of being on the same page.
Hmm.
If a teacher comes to me about a student acting up in class, they know that it will be addressed. Um, if a student's struggling in class, they know that I'm probably sending them to that class after school instead of coming to practice with me. in order to get those guys caught up. And then from administration standpoint, I've been very, very blessed to be, to be able to coach my guys, and I coach them hard. And even from the parents in our community, I mean, they want their kids coached hard. And I think that is kind of uncommon, because I think everybody thinks they do until it comes time for it to really happen. And I think here where we are, they let us coach their kids, and it's, I'm pretty old school, and I don't know. I've just been really blessed with, they've stayed out of the way and let us coach these guys. And that's a big deal.
That's great. I think that to have that support, and I think for the teachers to know, like, hey, if I say something to coach about, what's going on, I can trust that, he's going to deal with it and not like take the student's side or, ignore what the teacher's saying. And I think that builds a lot of trust. And for players, I'm sure if they know like that, oh, my teacher and, my coach, they're going to be in good communication or are in good communication, I'm sure in a lot of ways that maybe stops potentially some issues from taking place when they know that, in a way, like all eyes are watching them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it helps. Now, there's always a knucklehead or two, but I think that's everywhere.
Yeah, there's always the ones who I forgot what a teacher said. They just need a little extra love or care or attention.
Yeah.
Some of them are special in their own way, for sure. If you were to talk to a coach who maybe is having some issues in terms of consistency, maybe their program's kind of up and down, maybe you personally have seen programs that are kind of up and down, what would be some either advice or things that you would want that coach to examine if you feel like their program is just sort of like on the roller coaster ride, 1 year up, 1 year down sort of situation?
I think one of the biggest things I would tell somebody is goes back to, hanging your hat on something. For us defensively, we talked about that. And I think that would be a great place to start, is just, find something you're comfortable with, learn as much as you can about it, make that a staple of your program, and really stick with it. And there's ups and downs with everything. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There's been nights teams that made 12 threes, and I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing playing this? But you kind of have to, you just got to be, have enough faith in yourself. And then, and the problem in today's society is so many people you've got to win right now, or you don't ever get that chance again. From an administration standpoint, I think the biggest mistake programs make is if you look at not every, because every is a big word, but if you look at most of the programs at the college level that are successful, those guys have been there for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And that's not coincidence. And you get these programs who think, oh, this guy, he wasn't 500 last year, and after year 2, we're going to fire him, and then we're going on to the next guy, and then after year 3, you're in the same boat. That's a problem in our occupation, and it has been and will continue to be. But the biggest thing I think is continuity, and then understanding, here's what we're going to do. Here's the staple of our program, and I'm gonna hang my hat on this, and this is what we're going to be. I think that would be one of my first, maybe the biggest piece of advice I think I would give somebody. It's
kind of like a science problem when you have all these variables and maybe nothing that's like constant. Maybe you just have to have some things that are constant that you sort of stick with, because then you can focus in on those and like you said, kind of get really good at something. Kind of, it's almost like piece by piece. I think what you said though is, I'm sure is a concern that, a lot of coaches have, is, feeling like, the fire is, under the hot seat the second that they got the job, and worried that they're not going to have that sort of time to do that. Do you feel any sort of pressure from outside forces? Do you feel anything from parents or otherwise about this pressure to stay at a consistent level, or is that something you've just sort of been able to navigate or deal with? Maybe you put more pressure on yourself than anybody else. You can talk a little bit about what that pressure might look like.
When I first started, like I said, I had assisted Coach Hawkins for 3 years, and he had a lot of success, and I had kind of been brought in here and groomed to be the next guy. And when that position came open, I had a lot of thought just because, man, it's hard to follow somebody like that.
Yeah.
And you feel like, early in my career, I felt like every night I had to prove myself to somebody. Now it's not so much. And what you said, I think now the pressure comes from myself. And you hear all the time, and I hate to lose way more than I like to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people it's a curse a lot, just because that's what we're doing. And you don't enjoy a win, because as soon as that game's over, you're looking forward to the next one, or trying to get prepared for the next one. There will always be pressure of some shape or form. I mean, but again, I believe, I've heard people say pressure is a privilege. And if you're going to be at a job, if you're going to be successful, you want to be in those situations, because if there's not any pressure, then, you're not getting any better. So I just really believe that pressure being a privilege is the way that I kind of look at that, especially now later in my career. Early, it was hard, because when you're trying to make a name for yourself and it doesn't go great all the time, really, it can be really, really hard. But again, stay the course and do the right thing, and usually things will work out.
No, I like that. Pressure being a privilege. I haven't heard that quote, but I like that one a lot, actually. I'm gonna put that up. Might go on a quote wall that I'll make one of these days. I get so many good quotes that people tell me. I really like that one a lot. Pressure is a privilege. I mean, if you think about it, like you said, like to have the, privilege of being, what you are, the coach at Thayer, there's only one of those that is doing your job, right? So there's only one person who gets to have that position that you do, and there is pressure on it, but there is kind of, like you just said, the privilege of being able to be that person who has that particular job is pretty nice in and of itself as well. So yeah.
And I think, I heard Jay Billis speak, or he was talking on Twitter the other day, and it was just about, at no matter what level that you're coaching at, being successful is being successful. It doesn't matter if you're Coach K at Duke, or no matter what level you're at, winning's winning. And how it feels to do that, how it feels to lose. It's really kind of all the same. I don't know if it would be any different if, no matter where you are, I don't know if I would feel any different if I were coaching at Arkansas. The next game is still the next game, and you're going to do everything you can in your power to have your guys ready to play. And to hear Jay Billis say that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because to us, it's, as coaches, our next game's as important as Coach K's next game.
Yeah.
And I just never had really thought of it like that.
Well, you probably, whether consciously or subconsciously, have kind of kept that belief when you're in those district championship games, or when you're in those playoff games, because the venue does change, right? The stakes, the pressure, the intensity of those games does change. But as you kind of mentioned, the end of the day, you still need to prepare as best you can for that game. And at the end of the day, the ref's going to throw up the ball, and there's going to be 10 players on the court, and the game is going to still be played kind of the same way as it's always been. So in a way, you've kind of, I feel like kind of internalized that with your preparation and the way you sort of go about preparing for each game.
Yeah. And I think too, from a standpoint of players, I think when they see something different, if you've done it this way all year long, and all of a sudden you get to the biggest game all year and you do something a little different, there's a comfort level that they are uncomfortable with that already. When you get there, and they're either assuming, okay, coach is doing this different because he don't think they're as good, or coach is doing this different because he don't think what we've done is good enough. You've got to have those guys in a mindset to get where, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do to get ready to beat this next opponent. And like we talked earlier, I feel like the more constant it can be the whole way throughout the season, I think at the end, that's a big deal.
Well, and as you know, and you can speak to this, your players, they look at you as kind of a source of kind of like a rock, almost like somebody who's like stable, and somebody they can trust and rely on. So when they might feel a little bit nervous, or they might feel like the pressure of a game, if they know like, oh, like, well, my warm-up routine's the same, coach is just as he's always been and has like that same demeanor about him, there's probably a certain comfort level that kind of puts your guys at ease, knowing that there's so many things that are still staying consistent, even if the venue or the stakes of the game change.
Yeah, and I think that's, from a leadership standpoint, I think that's a big deal. No matter what you're doing, is no matter how, don't get too high, don't get too low. Try to be the same guy. Obviously, they know the stakes are higher. They don't need to be reminded that, hey, you're playing in a state quarterfinal or a state semifinal. I mean, they know that. I'm not always good at that. I feel like sometimes that I micromanage things. I've tried to do better and let guys be their own player a little bit more. And the crew I have right now, I've blessed with some good athletes and some good players. And this summer, that was one of my goals, was to kind of step back, especially on the offensive side of things. And let's not make it so concrete. Let's just play and you guys relax and let's see how it goes.
Yeah. It's that tricky balance, I feel like, versus kind of like letting your players play and letting them be relaxed versus, having structure and wanting to coach and have certain things that are kind of put in place. I still deal with it too. I feel like there's this perfect balance, and I don't know if I'll ever find it, but it's always something that tinkering with. I'm the same way.
Well, if you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah, likewise. If you figure it out, let me know too. We'll all work together on this. Hey, if you're listening and you figure it out, let us know.
Let us know.
Sure. You mentioned a couple of times how important preparation has been, and just kind of focusing in, preparing in for the next game. So to speak on that, what do you do in terms of your preparation? How much film are you looking at? What are you kind of looking at as you're kind of scouting? Do your assistants do scouting? What goes into preparing for that next opponent, whoever they may be?
With Huddle now and things like that, it's a lot easier to get.
Huddle's great.
But yes, to get 5 games on somebody or 8 games, used to, you'd have to get in the vehicle and drive and watch them in person, which I still like to do that when I can. But as far as, probably the normal, like everybody else does. I mean, you want a couple games before, and you want to see what they're going to do against the defense that's similar to yours. Personnel wise, who can, who can't. And that's one thing, is this kind of keeps going back a little bit to the matchup. But, when you play a defense similar to that, everybody's got 15 or 20 man sets that if you're playing man to man, you've got to get your kids through all that. You've got to be well versed in what they're trying to do. And one thing with our matchup, I mean, zone offense has come a long way, but there's still only so many things people can do against it. And, every day in practice, if we defend their top 4 or 5 actions out of what they're going to try to do to attack our zone, it is amazing the time that it does leave you for offense or something, you know what I mean? Something like that. Just the scout time seems to be a lot different when you're trying to prepare for somebody when you're playing man opposed to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point that you bring up, and just kind of goes with, as we kind of talked about, thinking about what you want to stay consistent at and what you kind of hang your hat on, as I mentioned a couple of times, and kind of, it's almost in a way kind of like viewing the film that you look at kind of through that lens. In a way, that's kind of what it sounds like you do. Like, what you're consistent at, what you're hanging your hat on. And so as you look at film, you kind of look at things through that lens and kind of see how it kind of fits and how what you like to do kind of works within what they're doing. And it's a little chess game that goes on from there.
Yeah. And I think, even though what we're doing defensively is a little bit different, that's what I always tell people when they ask me about it, is the goal of a good defensive team. They're always the same, whether you're playing man or zone. Your goals are going to be pretty much the same. I mean, you're going to you're trying to limit easy buckets. You're trying to make them take contested perimeter shots. It's just about how you go about getting them to do that. So I don't know. It's just really different. I think the way that we look at it, like I said, we don't use the word zone a lot because we're just playing defense, man. We're just trying to make it hard on you.
Yeah, at the end of the day, right? We're playing defense, and like you said, there's so many misconceptions about when people hear the word zone. I think they I think
Yeah.
there's a belief that it's just like you're just being lazy and just sort of sagging off and not doing anything. But
Yeah.
I don't, especially in a matchup zone. I know they can't be further for the truth. And as I've said this, and I've had other coaches say this, you can't even do any sort of a zone anyway unless you have good man-to-man principles as it is.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
so yeah. Don't fall in the trap. And anyone listening about what a zone is, it doesn't. I've seen a lot of bad zones. I'm sure you have too.
Yes. Yes.
Seen
And I've
those.
seen a lot of bad man.
Yeah, well, I've seen it. Oh yeah, I've seen that for sure. That's funny. In terms of, I guess like the word, I don't want to say like traps, but traps might be the best word for it. For coaches who are, maybe they're in the point where they are, kind of being consistently successful. They're kind of seeing that success. What are some things that you think they might want to look for that might be just like seem like little insignificant things, but can end up like becoming like a much bigger issue if that coach doesn't like deal with it or fix it or kind of plug that hole up right away? What are some potential cracks that might occur that coaches need to make sure they're ready to seal?
Well, I think coaching is just like playing, and from the aspect of, I tell our guys a lot, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I think as a coach, if you're not constantly trying to find something, a different way maybe to do something, even if it's practice or another type of offense or an inbounds play, I just don't think you can get complacent because the game changes so fast. We have to do things now that we weren't doing 5 years ago defensively. And that will be the same 5 years from now. So I wouldn't, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. I think that's another thing, just like with players, you get comfortable doing something. Don't be afraid to look at something different. And I know that kind of goes against what I'm saying defensively. I'm not saying, scrap everything and start over, but there may be a different way of how you want to cover a ball screen, or there may be a different way you want to teach a closeout. I mean, I don't believe there are concrete things in this game that have to stay the same to be successful, but there's a lot of different ways to get to that point.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it feels like, and as you're kind of like growing as a coach and you're kind of evolving and you're kind of developing, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you have taken in or watched or read that you don't want to use, or it doesn't really apply to what you're trying to do, but it's still like good for you to have, and it's still good for you to be aware about it, if that makes sense, like, and just knowing what's going on.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful. I'm kind of a junkie, so I go through stuff and I'm liable to watch an offense and be like, hey, we can do that, or we can do that. And at the end of the day, you've got a sheet worth of stuff and you can't get good at any of it because you've got too much of it. I think you've got to kind of pick maybe 2 or 3 things offensively that, here's what we want to focus on doing. Or like I said, I've been bad in the past about trying to do too many things good on offense. I've got to figure out a way to make it, I think, simpler is better. And that's the route we're going to try to take with this team on offense. It's just, I'm going to try to step back and not micromanage so much and let these guys be players.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up a good point about, for a coach who maybe at the part where they are being consistently successful, they might feel like they don't have to change a lot, or like they have what they do and they're good at it, so this is what we're going to do. But as you mentioned before, like the game it's always kind of changing, it's always evolving. And I think you can probably visualize the way that teams were attacking you defensively 5 years ago, and it's probably like you mentioned about, it's probably changed now, and you're like, oh, like what the people are doing against our matchup zone looks a little bit different than maybe what they did a few years ago. And by staying up to date with like things that are going on in terms of the way basketball is played, it's probably helped you kind of be aware and be kind of ready for the different ways people are going to kind of try and attack you now in 2021 than maybe they did 5-6 years ago.
Oh yeah, no question. Back then, a lot of people ran just base zone type offenses, and if you're going to stay in a zone offense and we can just sit on you where you're at, that's when we really got good at it. Now it seems like so many people are more motion based where it's more reads instead of concrete, this is where he's going when he does this, or if he passes here, he's going to do this. And so we've really had to work and kind of evolve our defense to be able to guard that type of stuff.
Yeah. And it's just being aware that, that's going to happen. And like we've talked about a couple of times, it doesn't mean you have to completely blow up your whole defense because of something that you see. You just have to be like, okay, they're going to do that. Well, we just have to do this little adjustment and hopefully we're good and we'll see how it goes. Right.
Yes.
And the other part here about preparation, before we kind of wrap up, I want to make sure that I address it, is what do you do in terms of looking at your own film? Like when you're looking at your own game film or looking at how players did, or are there certain things that you've stayed consistent that you've always looked at or you think that are really important to look at, or what's kind of your process through kind of looking through a previous game film?
If we're looking at a previous game, obviously I think one of the first things we look at is rebounding. I mean, where were we at in the rebounding game? Were we able to stay even? Were we plus? Or, where we were there? Because most of the time, if you win that battle, and in my experience, if you can win a battle on the glass, we're generally in pretty good shape. Opponent field goal percentage, points per possession, things like that are things we look at offensively, points per possession. That's a big deal. Opponent field goal percentage. And then when you look back just from a shot chart, what shots were they getting? Were they contested? Basically just the same stuff I think that everybody looks at. But we really emphasize rebounding a ton. And probably, that may be one of the biggest things we emphasize, especially out of our defenses, because a lot of people's knock on playing that type of defense is rebounding. And that's really never been an issue, but I think it's because we emphasize it on a daily basis.
And even to the point where your 6-1 and under team is still getting after it on the boards, right?
Oh yeah, no question. That's like this bunch we've got this summer. I mean, we do have a 6-3 and a 6-4, but we played the last shootout we went to. Like I said, we're class 3, and the 3 teams we played were class 6. We go 2-1 on that day, and where they're throwing 6'5" and 6'6s out there, we're throwing 5'11s and 6-footers, and just because of what they know, what they're expected to do, they get it done. And that's just a compliment to the kids, the type of kids we have.
Yeah, no, that's great. To wrap up, actually, before I ask this concluding question, I wanted to ask you, because you have the experience in this, for coaches listening who are going to be fortunate enough in the next coming year or two to maybe get into the playoffs for the first time and see that sort of success. What advice would you give to a coach listening who's maybe going to be making their first playoff run next year?
I think one of the biggest things is you don't take that for granted, because, winning a district, getting into the playoffs, that's some of the hardest things that there are to do in our occupation. So don't hesitate a little bit to step back and kind of take that all in, because the support from the community and things like that is awesome. And the kids need to, relish that and really take it in. And then from a coaching standpoint, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You were good enough to get there. Continue to do what you do. Don't overcoach it. Like I said, I've been guilty of that. Don't try to be something you're not. Do what you're good at. Be who you are. Your kids will be more comfortable that way, because you can't, if you've got 5 days to prepare or 3 days to prepare, you kind of are what you are at that point. So just, be confident in what you're doing, and your kids will feed off that confidence and go out there and compete like crazy.
I like that you brought up the point about enjoying it. I think I fall into that trap sometimes when I've had teams who have done well, and I don't know if I appreciated the moment or the time I had with them together. Kind of looking back on it, I feel like I was so focused on whatever I had to do next, I didn't just take a step back. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it is really easy to get so invested that you kind of don't stop to take in the success that got you there in the first place.
Yeah, and I think, something we haven't talked about, and, just the relationships you have with your players, I think is something that goes, everybody wants to talk X's and O's, or everybody wants to talk this or that, or, like we said, culture is a big deal right now, but the relationships that you develop with your players is a really is a huge thing, and I think maybe goes unnoticed. And I think when you look at the great coaches, yeah, they all know X's and O's, and they all know the same stuff. But a lot of times the difference is how they handle those kids and how those kids think about them. I heard somebody say one time, it's really hard to learn from somebody that you don't like.
Yep.
Not saying that we're in the business to make friends with our players, but they need to respect you and they need to know you care. And the more that they know that you care, the more that they're willing to do for you. And I know I've not always been good at that, and that's something that I work on daily. And for those guys to graduate and come back on Christmas break or Thanksgiving break, and they want to come and play, or they want to come watch us play, or they just want to call and check on you and see how things are going or how the team's going to be. I think that goes unnoticed with the great coaches, is the relationship they have with their players.
No, that's absolutely true. That's fantastic. And the old saying goes, they won't care to learn until they know that you learn that you care, something of that nature.
No, you're right.
Like that.
You're right.
They won't care to learn until they learn that you care. I think that's how.
That's right.
Which
exactly
is absolutely
right.
True. Absolutely.
If they don't know you're in the trenches with them, when it gets rough and things get tough, they want to know that you're right there with them, and that means a ton.
100%. Awesome. This is great, Coach. To wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, I know there's so many moments to choose from, but what is a coaching moment from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Something that I always think about is, you're up 3, the whole do I foul or do I not foul situation. I've lost a couple games because I didn't foul, and looking back, if it's under 6 seconds, 5 seconds, that's something I think I would look to foul going forward. We talk about hanging your hat on something. I had a situation one time in a state quarterfinal game that, I kind of went away from what we did, and there was a kid that came off the bench, and we had scouted him and wasn't a great shooter, so we were going to do some things different defensively, and left him alone. He makes 2 threes, so that taught me right there. I would have been way better off to stay with what I knew and what we had hung our hat on all year long. So that's just a couple instances there.
Yeah, it's all those ones that stick with you, the moments that'll stick with you for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. In the wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. You can go longer if you want. There's no stopwatch for you. Your platform to get out kind of a final message, a closing thought, closing idea, something that you would like to leave the listeners with. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, Coach, and you can take it away.
I think probably just what we've talked a lot about is just, have something that you're really passionate about and that you believe in, whether it be, if it's defensively, really become well-versed in that. People in your conference need to know what you're about. People in your district need to know what you're about. I mean, if they're going to come play you, they need to know that, man, we're in for a rough night because this is what we're going to see, and they're going to be good at it. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And obviously as being confident as a coach, but also from your team from the standpoint of them being confident in what they're doing. I just think it's hard to jump around from one thing to the next and then them feel really comfortable doing it. So kind of my piece of advice there would be find something that fits what you want to teach and maybe your personnel, and going forward, something that you feel like that you could teach each group and become good at it. And even if it is the same thing every year, like for us defensively, but we've had to make some tweaks, but don't be afraid to hang your hat on something and be great at it. Because it's really hard to be, even if you're mediocre at 5 things, I still think it's really a lot better to be great at 1.
True. That's really well said. That's a really good point to leave it off on, for sure. I really like that a lot. Coach Pitts, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about Thayer, both the city, both the town, both the school, the culture and everything, and just all the things that have led to your program being consistently successful all the way from when you were playing all the way through coaching right now. So I wish you all the best and continued success as we hopefully move into a more normal year next year. And Coach, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.